The press release is 6 sentences long. You have rewritten it 14 times, not because the language is wrong, because every word in it will move a market before the ink is dry, and you are responsible for every basis point that follows. It is 6:12 a.m. on a Thursday in a building with no identifying signage on the street. You have been here since 4 a.m. The decision was made last night in a room with 7 people and no recording equipment. Today you announce it to the world. You are 51 years old. You control the money supply of a nation of 84 million people. You did not choose this. The system chose you. That distinction will matter more than you expect. You were 31 when you first walked into a central bank as an economist, not the governor's office, the research division, a shared desk, a government-issue laptop, and a stack of quarterly inflation reports nobody outside the building would ever read. Your job was to model the transmission mechanism of monetary policy, how a rate decision made in one room filtered through the banking system, through credit markets, through mortgage rates, through consumer spending, through employment, through the price of bread in a city 300 kilometers away. You built the models. You ran the regressions. You published papers in journals that 12 people read. You were not building a career. You were building a map. The map would matter later. You did not know how much later. 3 years in, you were assigned to the Monetary Policy Committee as a technical advisor. You did not vote. You prepared the briefing materials. You sat against the wall while the committee members sat at a table. You watched how decisions were actually made, nothing like what you had studied in graduate school. Consensus was manufactured before the meeting began. The real debate happened in corridors, in bilateral calls, in lunches that never appeared on any calendar. The formal meeting was documentation. The decision had already been made by the time the room filled. You filed that observation away. You would use it for the next 2 decades. You became chief economist at 38. The title meant you spoke for the institution on technical matters. You gave testimony before parliamentary committees. You sat across from finance ministers and explained why the committee's decision was correct even when you had privately argued against it in the room. You learned to hold 2 positions simultaneously, the public position and the real one. That capacity became the most valuable skill you developed, more valuable than the econometrics, more valuable than the publishing record. You left for the IMF at 42. 3 years in Washington, 2 years in the field. You restructured monetary frameworks in 2 post-crisis economies. You sat across from finance ministers who were managing sovereign debt at the edge of default and told them exactly what their options were. You were not cruel. You were precise. Precision at that level is its own form of power. The countries that followed the framework recovered. The ones that didn't, did not. You flew home from the field carrying something you had not brought with you. A permanent understanding that monetary policy is not abstract. It lives in exchange rates and import prices and the cost of fuel and whether a family in a secondary city can service their mortgage this month. The abstraction was always a privilege of distance. You no longer had it. You were appointed deputy governor at 46. The appointment was political in the way all such appointments are political. The finance minister knew your work. The prime minister's office had reviewed your IMF record. You were not a surprise. You were a consensus candidate, which is the highest compliment the system offers. Your first year as deputy was education in institutional mechanics. The governor was a man named Hartwell who had held the position for 9 years. He moved through the institution like weather, slowly, comprehensively, without drama. You studied his decision latency. How long before he moved on a rate change? What made him wait? What made him accelerate? You built a behavioral map of the man the same way you had once built transmission mechanism models. When Hartwell told a minister he intended to step down, the minister called you that evening. The call lasted 4 minutes. You accepted. You understood that 4 minutes was not an insult. It was confirmation. The decision had already been made before the call. You have been governor for 3 years. The inflation targeting framework is yours. The communication strategy is yours. The forward guidance language that appears in every quarterly report has been drafted, revised, and calibrated by you personally. You understand that central bank communication is monetary policy. The words move markets before the rates do. A misplaced adjective in a prepared statement can add 20 basis points to long-term yields before you finish the sentence. You have learned to write the way a surgeon operates. Nothing extra, nothing ambiguous, nothing that gives the market a surface to trade against. Last year, you held rates through 2 consecutive quarters when every external forecast called for a cut. The pressure was significant. The finance ministry sent signals through intermediaries. 3 members of your committee dissented publicly. The financial press ran editorials. You held. You had seen the wage data before it was published. The inflation expectations embedded in the forward surveys had not broken. You held because the model said hold, and because you had spent 20 years building the judgment to trust the model when the room was telling you something different. 6 months later, the data confirmed the decision. Nobody apologized for the pressure. Nobody was expected to. That is not how this works. The thing nobody prepares you for is the weight of the counterfactual. Every decision you make is visible. Every decision you did not make is invisible, but permanently present. The rate you did not cut. The guidance you did not issue. The intervention you chose not to execute. These live alongside every outcome, and they are yours. The governor carries the counterfactual. It does not appear in any report. It does not surface in any testimony. It sits quietly behind every public statement and every meeting and every rate decision, and it accumulates. You feel it most at 4 a.m. when the building is empty, and the screens are on, and the data is in, and the decision is forming. And you understand completely that you are one person making a choice that will distribute consequences across millions of lives you will never see. You do not feel powerful at 4 a.m. You feel the specific weight of a responsibility that has no exit. Your social world has compressed to a radius that contains only people who understand the constraints of your position, not because you chose that radius deliberately, because the position created it structurally. A governor cannot have unguarded conversations. Every word you say outside this building is a potential signal. A dinner that appears casual is never casual if you are in the chair. You have 3 people you speak to without filters. Your deputy, your chief economist, one former governor who calls you on Sunday mornings and says nothing useful and everything necessary. Your marriage has survived the position. You are not certain how. The architecture of your household has quietly reorganized itself around your absence in a way that functions but does not resemble the original design. You notice this without knowing what to do about it. That is an accurate description of most things at this level. In 11 months, your term ends. The ministry has not signaled renewal. You are not certain you would accept renewal if it were offered. You are not certain what you would do without the position. You have been a governor so completely for 3 years that the separation between you and the role has become difficult to locate. The machine is not something you run. It is something you have become. A rate decision is forming now. The data came in at 2 a.m. The committee meets in 6 days. You know what you will recommend. You knew before the data arrived because the framework is yours, and the framework tells you what the data will mean before the data speaks. That is the result of 20 years of building the map. The map works. It has always worked. It will work after you are gone, and someone else is sitting in this chair at 4 a.m., reading the same screens, carrying the same weight, making the same invisible choices. The press release has been rewritten 15 times now. It is 6 sentences. It is correct. You will release it at 9 a.m. The market will move. You will not watch the screen when it does. You already know what it will say.